Die Walküre by Richard Wagner. Now you've probably heard of this opera before, but you probably haven't heard it referred to by its German title, Die Walküre. And you've probably heard it referred to as the Valkyrie. And the Valkyrie, or Die Walküre, were the warrior daughters of Wotan, the king of the gods, who conducted heroes who had fallen in battle to their reward in Valhalla, the home of the gods. And this medieval Germanic subject is certainly typical of Wagner's operas. By the way, notice that the title has an umlaut in it. It has an E after the U, changing the U sound, the U, into E, as in Die Walküre. You already know that this work is an opera, so genre is not a great challenge with this work or in this unit. This opera is part 2 of a cycle of 4 operas by Wagner called Der Ring des Nibelungen, the Ring of the Nibelungs. And this cycle of 4 operas was intended to be performed on 4 consecutive nights. And it is still done so at the Festspielhaus in Bayreuth. The story of Die Walküre comes from medieval Germanic legend, and as I've already noted, its subject matter is typical of Wagner's operas. Now the story of Die Walküre does not focus on the actual title characters of the work, the Valkyrie, the warrior maidens who rode flying horses, and who conducted fallen warriors in battle to their reward in Valhalla, but rather it focuses on the love and the death of a certain hero in this saga. So let's take a look at the 3 main characters involved in this section of the work. And please remember, you have now arrived at that portion of the course in which you are responsible for knowing something about the subject and the story of an opera, and something about the 3 main characters in that opera as well. The first of these characters, although he's not the person we actually encounter in the first scene of the opera, is someone called Hunding. And Hunding is a huntsman, and he is the husband of Sieglinde, the heroine of the opera. It should be easy for you to remember Hunding, huntsman, and husband. What an easy way to identify this character. Since we've already mentioned her, let's take a look at who Sieglinde is. You already know that she is the wife of Hunding. She is also the daughter of Wotan, and right in the first scene of this opera, right before our very eyes, she falls in love with Siegfried. So this opera is clearly about illicit, adulterous love, and as we're going to see, it's also about doomed love as well. So Sieglinde is in love with Siegmund. Notice how their names are similar, Sieglinde and Siegmund. It's easy thus to identify them as the pair of lovers. Siegmund finds his way to Sieglinde's house and collapses on her hearth. He is a warrior who is the son of Wotan, and he is in love with Sieglinde. So Siegmund and Sieglinde have plenty in common. First of all, they are in love with each other. And they also have the same father, so they are brother and sister. Don't you just love opera? What's interesting about this tale is that neither Siegmund or Sieglinde is terribly concerned about such details as adultery or incest. Only their love seems to matter to them, but this love is doomed, as you can imagine. After the two of them meet in Sieglinde's home, they share a drink together, they fall madly in love with each other. Then Sieglinde's husband, Hundig, comes home, and he certainly is very struck by the fact that the two of them look so very much like each other. Sieglinde eventually runs away with Siegmund, and Hundig catches up with them. He fights a duel with Siegmund, and he wins, and Siegmund dies. Sieglinde is spirited away to a safe place where she gives birth to a child born from their union, the hero Siegfried, a character who dominates the next two operas of this four-opera cycle of operas. And it's interesting to note that he grows up to fall in love with his aunt. So incest was not really a taboo for the ancient Norse or Germanic gods. In terms of technique and construction, this opera is typical of Wagner's mature works of this type. And this long drama is unified throughout by leitmotifs. Now you already know that a leitmotif is a musical idea that is associated with a person, a place, or a thing, and in this opera we find leitmotifs associated with each of the characters. There really is one for each of the three main characters that we've mentioned, one for Hundig, one for Siegmund, and one for Sieglinde. You will hear that for Hundig sounded right at the very end of the scene that we are going to hear, and those for the other two main characters, Sieglinde and Siegmund, are sounded throughout the scene, sometimes separate from each other, sometimes in combination. And below your podcast screen you will find links that you can click on to hear the leitmotifs associated with each of these characters. It's very easy to tell these leitmotifs apart. The leitmotif for Siegmund goes down and then comes up at its end, and that for Sieglinde goes upwards and then comes down at its end. And if you take a look at the libretto or the listening outline that you have for this particular scene, you will notice indicated in them two orchestral climaxes. And if you listen to the music at each of these points, you will hear these motives or leitmotifs sounded in combination with each other. And it makes perfect sense that they should appear thus, because in each of these portions of the scene, attention is focused on a drink. First, a drink of water that revives the exhausted warrior Siegmund, and later the honeyed mead that the two share and that signals the beginning of their love. There are also leitmotifs that deal with emotions, and one of these is the love motive. And the love motive occurs in great abundance right after the two sections of the scenes that I have pointed out to you. That is, after Siegmund has taken a drink of water, and after the two of them have shared a drink of mead. There are also leitmotifs that are associated with things, like with the sword that is lodged in the tree in the home of Hundig and Sieglinde, and so on. Now, these leitmotifs are constantly transformed according to the situation of the plot, and some of them are especially fluid in their form and in their content. But they are generally recognizable. Certainly those for the three characters are very easy to identify, and the many love motives sound similar to each other. Now, the leitmotifs serve the two purposes that leitmotifs are supposed to serve. That is, they underscore events of the plot. You hear the leitmotifs associated with each of the three characters when they appear, and they also predict events of the plot, as is the case with the love motifs.